Okay, welcome back, GIS learners. This is about the third time I've tried to record this tutorial, and I hope it doesn't crash on me again. What we're going to cover today is how to do thematic mapping in QGIS and how to use the print layout manager to create a formalized cartographic product, meaning a finalized, printable, printworthy map that you can use for project 1. So I'm in, again, the same QGIS Wadi Hassa area, and I have just sort of set up the village sites that we queried out before, and I have the SRTM DEM in the background. So let's start with thematic mapping in general. We're going to use the villages sites here. And if we open up the attribute table, let's remind ourselves that in the attribute table is a whole bunch of information that we could potentially display thematically, either using colors or symbols / the geometry of the objects, meaning the size or size gradation of the object. And we've got a lot of data in this table. Some of it is not 100% relevant because it's time periods and there's zeros and ones, but a bunch of it over here has some numerical values that are what we call continuous, meaning there's no theoretical end to them. They start at 0 for the maximum length and can go up to as big as was found in the field. And so there's a direction, but there's no inherent reason to stop, put the number 200 and not 201. If the thing is actually 201, we write 201. If it's 200, we write 200, right? On the other hand, we have some other types of information that are categorical. These we have set up as codes. Here, site type is all village, but we have some land codes, which are not in any particular order, and it's not like hilltop comes after spur or spur comes after hill slope or something like that. These are just categories, right? And then we have categorical numerical data, in this particular case, site number. These are just a unique sequence of numbers, and there's no reason, like 615 is not more, site 615 is not more site than site 20. It just happens that this number designation is 20 and this number designation is 615, right? So all of these things we can map to some sort of color or style variable using the properties dialog and the symbology tab over here. And we've been working with single symbols, so we've been changing the color and the size of points and lines, thicknesses and stuff here. But we can then now map that to those data columns using either categorized or graduated. Now the difference between these two is that categorized wants categorical data and graduated wants continuous data. You can kind of fudge them, and I'll show you how, but that's the basic difference between them. So if we choose categorized, we have to choose the column that we're going to map onto this. And by default, it's showing us pretty much all the columns that we have here because all of them can be thought of as categorical. These are the text ones and these numeric ones, even though some of these numerical ones are actually continuous data types. Let's choose land code, and we're going to leave the color ramp by default as random, so we're just going to leave that. We have to hit the classify button, and here it's gone into that data column and it's looked at all the different land code values that exist, and it's assigned a color to each of them. So when I hit apply, what we can see is that we now have colored dots, and the colors relate to the land code. Let's just change the symbol to be a little bit bigger so that we can actually see them a little bit better. So I'm changing it to about 4 millimeters. Click OK and OK. And now our dots are kind of big enough to where we can see the colors. And you may be wondering where the legend is. Well, in this particular case, the legend now shows up underneath the WHS Villages layer that we have already had over here in our layer manager. And this is the reason why eventually we're going to have to go into the print layout if we want to get the legend to appear in a box over here in the map display, or on our map when we want to do it. But for now, what I want to say is that you can go with the random colors like so. You can also choose a color scheme. Now, it may make sense to have these gradations of blue, but since these things are not, directional, having a directional color scheme like so really doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't aid the interpretation of this. The random colors were actually kind of better in this regard. There are, to get back into the colors, you guys see the little arrow here. There are other color schemes which are somewhere between ordered and random, like this rainbow one here. And you can play around with them to see if you like that. However, if you got categorical data, chances are the random color ramp is going to be the best for you. And when you do this, note that you will have the ability to go in and change some of the colors. So if I thought, for example, this kind of like, I don't know, lime green or avocado green is a little too close to this green, I can just double click on this, and now I get fine control over the color, and I can pick, for example, a bright red or something like that, and see if that looks better to my eye. And again, you have some ability to use tools like the color brewer that I showed you in class. If you go there and you find a color scheme, you can specify exactly the color by entering in the HTML notation, or what they call the hex code with the hashtag over here, for any color that you see. So let me just pull up the colorbrewer.org website over here, bring it over so you can see it. When you look at any color scheme that you have over here, and you can again choose which kind of data set. So here's a qualitative data set, and these are color schemes that you can use that show you how many variables. So here you have the set of 5 classes, let's say, like we have there. It gives you those codes right here, and you can copy them and go back into QGIS and paste them right into here and set that up for each of these colors, and you can set up this color scheme from Color Brewer directly in your in QGIS data file over here. Okay, so that is color. Let's talk about, let's say if we picked something like max length and we hit classify, it would give us all of these things like so. That really is like too many random colors. Here it makes a lot more sense to pick a color ramp that is going kind of in a direction. So here we have from dark blue through green to yellow in the viridis color ramp. And if we do that, maybe, if there was some pattern of visible, like directionally in the spatial layout of larger sites, the color scheme like this might make it pop out. Here, you kind of can see it, but color is not the best semantic to map to this particular one, because in this particular data set, it just doesn't, there's no visual patterning that this really helps us pick up. Instead, what we want to do is to choose the graduated, and we can try with color, but with the graduated we can actually reduce the number of size classes. So now we can choose 3 classes instead of just all the different values of size that are in the data set. And here it will give us small, medium, and large. It will automatically divide the data set up depending on how you choose over here. So equal count means it's going to try and put the same number of sites in each of these 3 categories. You might like that, or you might want to have the intervals between the cutoffs of size category be the same. So we would choose equal interval. And there we now have color relating to small, medium, and large, and maybe a better pattern kind of emerges here. And again, I'm not really seeing one on this particular map, with this particular data set of villages. It's not like all the small villages are in one place and all the large villages are in another place. In fact, we really only have one large village, at the size as determined over here. You can also edit these things to change the cutoff values between the different size classes. You could go up to 4 size classes, for example. And again, there are other ways to do this, like a logarithmic scale, which changes, on base 10, or you can use bases on standard deviation, and you can experiment with all of these different things and read the help files about, how that choice influences the classification of the sites. But this helps, right? And so color here is reasonable, but maybe we would rather do it with size, size of the symbol. So here we can do it like so, and we've got gradations in size like that. And maybe we like the default sizes, but maybe we actually want the range of sizes to be different. So the smallest one to be like 2 millimeters, and the biggest one can go up to like 9 millimeters. And now we've sort of changed that. And of course we can change each side of this independently of each other. So we can make the bigger ones a little bit smaller while keeping the small ones about the same size. And maybe to your eye that makes some sense to map it that way. Okay, so that is vector data. What about raster data? Well, because raster data doesn't have an attribute table, it just has one dimension of data associated with it. In our case, we've got this SRTM, which has elevation data in it. Really, all we have is the pseudo-color to map the elevation values to some sort of color ramp. And by default, it's showing it in grayscale, so that's already thematically mapping it, but maybe we want to use a different color ramp, like, for example, this one here. And maybe that shows us a little bit better what we're dealing with in terms of elevation values across the region. You can explore some of these color ramps. You can also change, some of these other, things like upping the contrast to change the way that these things are shown, or changing the saturation value. There's a lot of interaction that you can do to change the color mapping to one that you think kind of looks better. And I'll tell you that some of them are going to be like a little bit too bright for some situations, and you may want to stick with, for example, just the gray values, as in this one, to showcase other data that you're showing on top of it. And again, we can also bring in other layers of data, for example, the satellite imagery, etc. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to reset this villages back to single symbol and click OK. And I'm going to turn on our buffers and go back to our site 23 that we were digitizing in the last tutorial. So I obviously didn't do every single feature. I kind of just quickly did some in this area. But I want to showcase how we can turn this into a thematic map, because now we have an attribute table that has 2 columns, type and condition, right? And those are text-based categorical and numerical categorical data. And we can use those to create a thematic colored map of the features that we digitize. And that's what I asked you to do in project 1. So again, in the properties, under symbology, let's go to categorized first. We'll pick type. We'll hit classify. We'll find all the different types, and then we'll give it the random colors. And there we go. We have our features classified by type. If we wanted to, we could also choose in the categorize, we could choose condition and reclassify it to that. We got 3 conditions, 1 being in use, 2 being could be renovated, 3 being completely destroyed. And there is a 4th category which is unknown, but I didn't use that in mine, so it doesn't show up here. And when we click OK, now the colors relate to those condition categories. And if we wanted to, we could click over to the graduated, and because condition is numerical, we can then classify that. Now, 5 classes is too many for that. We only have 3, right? So if you're going to do graduated, you have to make sure that your classes are set to the same number that you actually have, and that they are actually meaningfully divided over here. So click OK. And that might work, but we might also want to do it instead by size. And here they're lines, so it's line thickness, and we're definitely going to want to change the beginning and end size classes here. Let's just see what happens if we make the smallest be 1 millimeter. Maybe that is visible to you, maybe it's not, right? I think probably mapping condition, we're better off using color, and since it's a category anyway, we're better off using categorized and using a random color ramp like so. Okay, so now we have all of this. How do we render all of this to a finalized map product? Well, we need to use the print layout editor. And we have these tools over here to do this. To very quickly make a new print layout, firstly I'm going to save my QGIS project before I do this. You can just really quickly hit new print layout, and you can do something like Site 23 Thematic Map, just to give it a human readable name. And it will open a new print layout dialog. This is a completely new interface that we haven't seen yet before. Before I get into this, I want to point out that you have this layout manager, and as you add new print layouts, you actually going to have a list of them over here. So this is going to be helpful for you eventually to manage all of your different print layouts, because basically you can think of each of these as a like the Photoshop project or the Adobe Illustrator project for the map that you're going to make, the final map product that you're going to make. So you can actually have a list of them saved here that you can use kind of like templates to go back and forth. But we made this new blank one over here called Site 23 Thematic Map. And the first thing that we want to do, because this again is like really meant for print or for creating a PDF or something, is to set the page size. And we go to the Layout File menu item and click Page Properties, and it shows up down here. By default, because QGIS is highly used in Europe, developed by Europeans, it's got the A4 page size, which is the European version of our letter size. It's in millimeters, so it's slightly different. Let's set it to letters so that if we're going to create a PDF, this will fit right into a document of letter size 8.5 by 11, right? And that is going to be helpful for us to set our page size. If we wanted to print bigger, we have all of these other defaults. For example, we have our larger A3 or A2 type sizes for the European, and then we have legal and some of these like arch sizes, which are poster sizes that you can do. But you can also type in directly over here in millimeters or inches the size of your paper that you want. So you can print, basically make the canvas any size you want. So So let's leave that at letter. Now we have our page set out. What we will want to do is to set up just a couple of guides or layout tools. Firstly, the grid spacing by default is in 10 millimeters. Since we're working in inches here, we're going to want to change that to like 0.1 inch or something like so. And we don't need to change the grid offset, it's just going to start in the upper left corner. And what that is going to do is help us when we're snapping elements to areas. It's just going to help us position items in our canvas. And if we wanted to put some guides, we could. Guides are like like little horizontal and vertical rules. So if I put like 0.25, 0.25 over here, so we get that little, see that red dotted line? That's a guide for the top 0.25. And we can put a vertical one, for example, at 0.25 over. And now we have this just sort of margin. And we could keep going and set them up on all sides. And how that's useful is now that when we want to go place elements on our canvas, we've got some guides and we've got some snapping going on over here. So the first thing that we want to do over here on the left side are all the things that we can add. We got scale bars and pictures and graphical elements, but obviously we want a map canvas. So by default, when we click Add Map, it's going to let us draw a bounding box, sort of freehand, and it's going to pull in whatever we're currently looking at in the map display. So now you can start to see how these two window dialogues are related. The print layout is, again, like our Photoshop or our Adobe Illustrator or our InDesign or Behance or something like that. It's a graphical designer that gives us a link back to our GIS data as displayed in the map display. And once you start to think of it that way, it starts to make some sense. This is blending the GIS stuff that we've done on the other display with now graphical layout choices that we're going to make in this display over here. At this point, we should hit the Save button. And again, it's going to be saved in our QGIS project so that when we restart our project, this particular layout is going to be in that layout manager. We can get right back to this if our program crashes or whatever. Okay, so we have our one map item here. We have then the item properties. I'm going to blow this up so that we have the whole screen to sort of look at this stuff. And I'm just going to make this area a little bit bigger like so. Okay, we have item properties, and right now it's set to whatever zoom level we were at. It's not any kind of round scale, so this is pretty close to 5,000, so I'm just going to type in 5,000 here, and that will set the scale to exactly 5,000. When we're making a map product, we really want to set the scale specifically. If we wanted to, we could rotate this over from north some degree. Don't do that unless you have a really good reason to, so I'm just showing you that you can. And for example, if we wanted to put a different grid on it, we could use a different CRS or a specific CRS, but probably you want to use whatever the project CRS is over here. This area over here for layers, by default, if I go back over here, and I turn off a layer, and I come back over here and hit this refresh button, it is going to reflect exactly what I did in the map display. So I just turned off the thing that I'm trying to map. That's no good. So let's go back and turn that on again. And when I hit refresh, it comes back. But I can lock it here, and I can lock the styles as well. And now, if I go back over here and I do something else, like, sorry, what I meant to do is to turn this off. Like I could just turn off everything, for example, like this. And now, even if I refresh, this is all locked in place. So what you have to know is that you basically set your styles up initially over here, get them the colors and get all the layers you want displayed over here, then when you add your first map layer, that's going to appear exactly the same way. Then you lock it, and in whatever else you do back in your map display, this is going to stay this way until you know you want to go back and change it. And then you can unlock it and refresh it so that it comes right back to whatever you've currently got displayed over here. One other thing I want to point out here, you can take a look at some of these things, but it's useful sometimes to set directly the size of your items over here. Now, because we set up those 0.25 inch snap lines, the guides, our X and Y are right there. It's snapped right there to the beginning. But if we didn't do that, we could set that here. And here we see the width and the height are actually uneven. We can truncate these to exactly 10.5 and exactly 8. And that anchors our upper left corner. That's what this point here is, to the 0.2525. And because we set the sizes like this, we have a perfect 0.25 margin all around. And we could change that to any way that we want. And if we want to have a nice black line border, we can turn the frame on here. And we can make it even thicker if we wanted to, just to make it a nice looking graphical item on our canvas. And there are other things that we can do. For example, we can lay out grids on top of them, and for example, use the interval that we want of I don't know what this is going to do for me if I do like one too many. So let's try 100 meters or so, like so. There we have a nice 100-meter grid that we can lay out on top. Now again, you may want to do this, or you may not want to do this, and you can change the style of the grid, different markers if you want, and you can even consider whether you want to set a graticule around it of any kind. Again, is this necessary for the map product that you're trying to make? Or is it just map junk that you shouldn't have on your map? You're the one who's going to decide all of that. Okay, so we have our main map added. Let's take a look at how we could interact with it. By default, the select and move item lets us change the size of things like that. Now, we already set the position exactly the way we want it, so we're going to do undo to get it back to the way that we had. We have all of these undo redos like any other graphical thing over here. This one lets us reposition the data inside that frame. So it's just letting me drag and drop this data inside that map frame without adjusting it. And this one, if I'm like zoomed in, just lets me sort of pan the actual canvas around without doing anything to the data inside the frame. So those are ways that we can, and this is also zoom if I wanted to specifically zoom in, like so. But I can use my mouse wheel also to zoom. So let's add a scale bar to this, and I'll just stick it down here, like so. And by default, it'll make it be whatever scale it thinks is the most sensible for your zoom level. Here it's showing me 200-meter scale. And you'll notice that as I move around, it's snapping in place because we set up our snapping at the beginning of our print layout manager experience. And here, under the properties for scale bar, seeing now that scale bar is highlighted up here, I can change the way that it looks. I can have it be a double box. I can have it be ticks. I can have it be this step line. Pick whichever one that you like. And you can even, if I had a different map, I could add the scale bar for each map that I have on here. Because I can have as many maps on this as I want. As long as I'm locking the styles for each of them, I can then go back, change it, and add a new map, and I'll show you how to do that in just a little bit. But you can see that there are lots of different things that you can edit, including the text, meters I could have here if I want, or just leave it at M. And I can change the number of segments that I wanted to make this thing bigger or smaller. And I can have the 0 in the middle and have 2 on the right and 1 on the left if I want over here. And of course I can turn the background on, put in a frame on if I want. All of those things are graphical decisions. So I want you to think about this. Change the color of it to be any color that you want. You can make it all white if you want. I'm going to undo that with Control-Z because it looks terrible. But you have the choice of all of this stuff. Of course, you can change any of these, but you better have a good reason for doing it. And if you don't, you can just kind of leave it alone. Okay, I'll just show that you can add a north arrow if you want. In this particular case, I'm going to avoid that. But I am going to want to add the legend because we're doing thematic mapping. Let's go ahead and add ourselves a legend. So I default tried to add it, and it gave me this giant thing. And really, it's showing me all the layers that I have in my layer manager over here. And yet, we don't need all of those layers in our legend over here. So if we see the item properties for legend, it's set to auto update. Let's uncheck that. And now we can start removing items from here that we are not actually looking at on our map. So everything that we don't really need to have in here, we can just start to remove. And now we're left with just the things that we can see. And in this case, what we can do is we can start to edit these things so that the text and the appearance of the legend match our expectations. So over here I got WHS Villages dash WHS Villages. That's just the layer name as it appears over here, right here. Now I could change this over here and it would auto update if this was checked here over here, but instead I'll just double click it here and type village site, right? That's the dot in the middle that's right here. And once I do that, my legend is updated. And this thing that says buffered, I can double click on it and type something like 300-meter buffer zone or something intelligible like that, and it shows up over here. And we also can update this over here. All of these codes, we can double click on them individually and write them out. Domestic cluster, for example, and farm. This would just be like farmhouse, right? Whatever it says in the the guide to the codes. Rock alignment. And we can continue doing that for all of these things over here so that they read very nicely. And if we want, we don't even have to have this thing say anything. We can just delete that part. And actually, so what we have to do is put hidden on it is what we need to do for that. And the same thing for this. We can, this one is like the extra value. It doesn't even show up. There's no red items over here. So we can remove that one. And now we just have the things that we want in our legend. And if we wanted to, we can put a title on this, and we can even tell it to wrap on, I'm just hitting my space bar, so every space you can change it, and it will do that to wrap it. You can put the symbols on the other side if you want, and you can set the size to resize automatically, or you can uncheck it and then set the legend exactly the size that you want. You also have the ability to break it apart into columns, for example. And let's just go back and click on resize. So here I've broken mine into 2 columns, and it has done it sort of this way for me. And I can go down to the spacing, and I can go to, where is it over here? Like I can increase the spacing around the outside of the edges. I can increase the spacing between the symbols, and so I can basically massage this graphically to look exactly the way that I want it to. And I can put a frame around it and make it look like it's part of the graphic items, like so. Oops, I don't know why I was frenetically zooming there. Okay, so this is actually pretty good. At this particular moment, we could be done. We could go over here and we could export it as an image or a PDF. And, I'm just going to do that real quick to show you. And hit save. And back in my QGIS projects, let me get back to wherever that is. GIS projects, Wadihasa, output graphics, where I saved it. I now have a PDF of this that is really nice looking. Now, at this point, I can call this done, but I can also open up my layout manager. Open it up from here. Go to my layout manager, and I can duplicate that one. And I can call it something like version 2. And now I'm basically looking at, I got 2 copies of this. That's the original one, and this is the second one. And the reason I'm doing this is for version 2, I'm going to try and add a locator map. And to do this, what I got to do is add a second map first. So over here on the left, add map, and I'm just going to drag one in like so. So this is an inset map that we are going to use as a locator map. Now remember, map 1 has been locked. So now I can go back in here and I can insert or change the view to any set of layers that I want. So let's just start with the Google satellites and just the Wadihasa Villages sites. And let's see how that looks over here. Let's just refresh our map too. And we can set the scale of this any size that we want. 5, something like that. And using this tool, we can sort of drag it so that we have them kind of there. Now, this is all well and good, but we don't have a linkage between the viewing area that we have on our zoomed in version and this inset second map. So what we have to do is to link them. At this particular point, we'll go to map 1, and we'll go down to where it says overviews. We will add a new overview, and then underneath it where it says draw overview 1, we're going to link it to map 2. And of course, I did that exactly the opposite of what I'm supposed to do. I have to be in map 2 and then go down to the map 2 overviews, add it, and then link it back to map 1. There we go. And now, you can't hardly see it, but there's this sort of red frame that shows the area that's viewable over here in map 1. And what we're looking at here in map 2 is that we're kind of a little bit too zoomed out, or maybe we have too many elements on here. Let's go back over here, and I'm going to turn those labels off because that might be enough for this particular moment. So I'm just going to put no labels and click OK. And then back to our Thematic map version 2. Let's hit the refresh in map 2. And now we can kind of see it, but I think we're still zoomed out just a little bit too far. So instead of 500,000, 1 to 500,000, let's try 1 to 300,000 and see if that's enough. And again, we can reposition like that if we need to. Yeah, maybe that's enough for us to be able to do it. Let's turn a frame on so that we can kind of differentiate that this is an inset. And if we wanted to put a north arrow in there now, we could probably do that. The other thing I want to show you is that you can get different base maps. So we have the satellite map now from Google, but let's go to our HCMGIS and grab ourselves, let's just see if this Esri light gray linear map is a nicer one. Does it help us locate ourselves? No, not particularly. So let's remove that one, and let's add in. Hold on, let me remove this old one here. Let's go ahead and add in the Esri terrain and see what that looks like. It may say this on the map display, but over here, it's probably because we're zoomed in too much. So let's see. Doesn't like that one, so let's remove that. And let's instead, I think the one that probably will do best for us is the Esri shaded relief. And again, the ordering that you see over here matters. So if we want to see those points, we got to make sure the orders are set. Now we're really seeing the inset over here. That makes some sense. And if we want to control that inset, if we go back into map 2 and we go down to the overviews section, we can change the style. Right now it's this sort of semi-transparent fill, but we can in fact add a solid line around it if we wanted to, and change the fill color to anything else that we wanted to. You can kind of see how it's sort of updating over there, including making it completely opaque. So depending on how you want to do this, you can decide what is the best style for you. But the default stylings are pretty good. Now again, it's up to you to decide whether the inset locator map is an important map element that you want to include. And it may be that because we're super zoomed in over here, I don't know if that is super helpful or not for this particular map. But I'm just showing you how to add these different elements to your final product. And the final thing that I'm going to show you here is that I showed you how to do it as a PDF. If you do export to image, you can decide what image format, TIFF, PNG, JPEG, whatever you want to do it to, and you can do it and set the DPI specifically for printing. So 300 is probably good enough for screen use, but if you want to print this in color, like photographic color, you should at least set it to about 600 DPI, like so. And again, when we go back in here, we are eventually going to get our output styled map over here, version 2. And this is what it looks like. And the DPI is so high that you can kind of zoom in pretty well. And you can see how that will print very, very nice. So with all of that in your mind now, you should be able to make very beautiful maps. And I encourage you to explore some of the graphic possibilities. Basically anything you could do in something like Adobe Illustrator or Adobe InDesign or Behance or something like that, you can pretty much mimic over here. You can put drop shadows and change the fonts to be nice fonts and change the line thicknesses and all of those things. You can really manipulate this to your heart's extent to make a very nicely styled, beautiful cartographic product.